Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 52 of the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from an undisclosed location. And we're here today to talk to the guys from Bromium again. It's been actually exactly 10 shows. Episode 42, we spent a lot of time kind of peeling back the onion and really learning a lot about it. And right now, we're ready to really take that a step further and actually talk about the product and what it is. And so with that, we welcome back to the show, Tal. So Tal, say hey and tell everyone a quick introduction.
Tal Klein. I am Senior Director of Products at Bromium, and I also clean up Simon Crosby's messes.
There you go. And the man making the messes, I guess, right?
That's right.
So Simon, go ahead.
I'm Simon Crosby. I'm the CTO of Bromium.
There we go. All right, so let's just start off with what is the product officially?
Well, at Gartner Security and Risk Summit in London, we launched our product vSentry, and it is the first, but it delivers a phenomenal change in the ability of enterprises to deal with determined attackers. So its specific goal is to deal with enterprises that are being targeted by advanced persistent threats. If you think back to the RSA attack of last year, these sort of large enterprise attacks. And what it does is it introduces this new architecture, which is core to everything that Bromium uses. So we're basically using hardware virtualization to isolate untrustworthy tasks. And it also adds profound new insights into the nature of ongoing attacks in the enterprise. So these are attacks that are completely undetectable by traditional endpoint security systems. And our goal is to defeat the unknown attack. And so by defeating an attack, we mean it's not going to get in no matter what. It's going to get thrown away, no remediation. And more than that, the enterprise will get full information in real time that will allow it to protect itself in depth.
Very cool, very cool. And yeah, I just received a demo of the product. Very, very cool. It does some amazing things, and kind of watching the status of all the micro VMs kind of be created and be destroyed, and it's really is a very, very cool product. And so, Tal, we were actually just talking about a little bit earlier about the whole concept of this really helps you protect even from like 0-day exploits, right?
Well,
tell me a little bit about that.
The whole idea is that without picking on the security industry, I think that it's become this sort of monolithic thing, which is a race to detect, right? It's like a race. Who gets the signature first? And there's actually like bragging rights between all the the various antivirus companies about who released who found this Trojan first and who found this APT first. Our perspective is that in order for it to be found, somebody has to be attacked and hacked, right? Somebody has to be compromised. It took them 2 years to find Stuxnet, and I think really what it comes down to is we built an architecture that is secure by design, and by that I mean it's not designed to be secure. The architecture is secure. So what happens is when I go into it with the assumption that every task will be compromised. And if you think about the world in that context, then you start to really be able to be creative and disruptive. And that I can tell you, the end user, go do whatever you want while ensuring that all of my corporate infrastructure is secure and protected.
And note that we're talking about corporate infrastructure, not just the security of the endpoint.
Right.
So it's important that in the event of an attack, not only does the bad guy not get hold of your data on the endpoint, but also they can't do what happened, for example, to RSA, which is use a compromised endpoint to get into the infrastructure. Okay, so because that's the first thing the bad guy does is just use a compromised desktop to get to the private cloud.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And think about it this way too. It doesn't matter even sometimes if it's a zero-day exploit. We were talking earlier. It's like, my laptop, for instance, I've been on the road for, 2 weeks straight now, and haven't probably VPN'd into the corporate network in a month now, and
you're not patched,
right?
Not
exactly,
patched. Right.
Exactly. And so, not only is it hitting recent attacks, but also there could be a long lapse, especially for business travelers in general.
Yeah, you're touching on 2 points actually. One is patch management, which is a huge pain in the ass for the IT administrator to ensure that you're patched because he's not the boss of you. And the other one is remediation, because the problem is when you do get infected, it is then his job to fix your laptop, right? And so the idea is if you have an architecture that shrugs off attacks, it lets you remain unpatched for as long as you need in order to be productive. But also, when the attack does come, it doesn't force the IT guy to then drop everything he's doing and spend the time and efforts and resources with fixing your laptop.
So just think about it in terms of what people do today. Well, actually, go back. Think of the data center before VMware, because the enterprise data center is VMware. People used to install software on servers and then applications and then rack them and stack them. Okay, great. Now they're all agile, efficient, power sensitive, cool, highly available, and blah, right? Okay, so they're strategic. But look at the endpoint practices. I mean, what does the endpoint security guy do? He waits for an alarm, and then he goes and reinstalls Windows. I mean, how strategic is that? What does the guy do who's responsible for patching? On Patch Tuesday, he rushes into the office and tries to get patches out to thousands of desktops which are vulnerable. And this is all just broken. By the way, you might have DLP software in there. By the way, if I compromise the desktop, DLP's done.
Right.
Okay, not helping at all. And desktop virtualization is certainly a better architecture in many respects. That is, if the data isn't leaving the data center, you can reason about compliance. But the attack would occur on a virtual desktop, no matter where it's running, in a server, or on the client. So the real problem there is a problem with humanity, which is that if you're IT and you face this risk, what are you going to do? One thing you can do is just build big walls around the enterprise. So you're only allowed to go to trusted places or do this. Right. But no matter what you do, there is nothing you can do to stop that attack. So, for example, the poisoned attachment which shows up. People have to open attachments because otherwise they can't do their work. And so that doesn't help. And so people have to deal with the untrusted world. You have to go to untrusted sites. You have to deal with this. You have to plug in USB keys. And when you do, you are at risk. And so if you accept that and go and build an architecture which is specifically designed to deal with that's designed to deal with our human frailties, right? Right. Deal with the unknown attack. Then you have a better shot at it. And that's the approach Bromium's taking.
And after seeing the product too, one thing is, if you get a chance, definitely go look at a demo, because the one thing that's really interesting to me about it too is we were talking earlier, the concept of, I'll use the phrase, signal to noise ratio, right? We were talking about if it's just a desktop with a whole bunch of processes and there is something bad in there, well, weeding out exactly what that is may be difficult. But what you're almost introducing is, through the micro VMs, the concept of swim lanes, of everything stays in, and it's very easy to follow exactly where you are and what one thing does. Okay, there you go.
And so if you think about it this way, think back to when VMware bought Determiner, right? Mm-hmm. They popped out this notion of introspection. And other folks have been toying with introspection. The problem is that with a whole operating system and all of its applications and all of its threats, it's way too murky.
Yes.
Moreover, on a desktop, when you plug in a USB key, we're patching the kernel to put some drivers in.
Right.
Okay. Is that an attack?
Right.
Well, it could be, but it might not be.
Right. Yeah.
So you know what to do. Yeah. So really, the challenge there is that it's impossible to tell.
I also think as we move to the cloud, right? I think I can't tell the difference, even if I try, the difference between malware and adware. What I mean? I can't. It looks exactly the same, and I think the software is just becoming more and more blobby, right? And so by that I mean it's just pieces of code. Some of them are on the cloud, some of them are using other services, and so it's getting harder and harder for you as an application or as an operating system to identify right from wrong.
Yep.
And ultimately it's undecidable. So the Bromium architecture basically says, look, it is undecidable whether a thing is going to attack me or not. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we knew this, right? Because we're all engineers and we all went to, and we heard about the halting problem when we were in college, right? Okay, great. So we know that this is no solved problem. And I think what's happened is that Moore's law has stacked up so badly against the traditional approach of AV.
Sure.
That basically at the end, and Moore's law is basically the bad guy has all of the cloud,
Right.
to generate new attacks.
Yes.
And the .dat file is 100 megabytes. How are you going to? Yeah. So there are some constants in there which make the whole problem unsolvable.
Sure.
And so, so we have a paradigm failure, and it's time for a paradigm shift. And so, what we're trying to do here is essentially say, well, gosh, if you have this very small code base which you add late to a system, in other words, not part of the system that came from Microsoft or from Apple or whatever. You have this tiny little code base that arrives late, but it is the most privileged software on the system. And it has no goal to be an operating system. It's just going to be in the way anytime any task wants to get hold of a file or a network or any device or deal with a user or put it in the clipboard. There's no way to get there without this thing getting in charge.
Sure.
Okay? And it's tiny, and all it's going to do is implement mandatory access controls. Okay. Think SE Linux mandatory access controls. That's kind of what it is, right? So you have, at that opportunity, you have an ability to implement policies which are aware of the application and what it should be doing.
Right.
So, for example, if I'm opening a PDF document, no PDF documents that I use get to talk to the internet. It's just not on, okay? And you think about that in the context of traditional endpoint security, your network security widgets, right? They might see a connection request from my PC to the internet. They wouldn't know there was a PDF document that sent it, right?
Exactly.
But before, right up in the face of the app, and the PDF doc says, "Hey, DNS, please resolve me this thing." It's like, at that point, you can say no, and you get a very good idea.
Right, and to combine it back into some of the things I saw in the demo, and so what Tal did in the demo that I just saw was. One thing was we went to a website that is a potentially bad website that would download some malware in the background to your laptop, and just by visiting the website, you are infected.
Right.
And if you combine that with the PDF earlier, and so if you had a PDF with a bad link, you click the bad link, you go to the bad website, poof.
Yes, right, exactly.
Right. And so to combine those two together, well, that action of the PDF and going to the website, you would actually block that.
Well,
or
it's
throw
actually,
it away, and
we wouldn't block it.
So here's the
two
point.
things would happen. Well,
Go ahead. So run us through all
excited.
The key thing is nobody can decide whether that's good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
That is okay. And even
without Microsoft doing user access control, okay, which no one ever does.
Well, they just click OK.
Yes,
that's all they do.
But even that, right? So the user is accustomed to UAC and always clicks OK. So the key principle here is that it's undecidable.
Yes.
Okay. And so if it's undecidable, then you still have to, I still have to protect you. That is, even at the point at which you're done, I still may not know whether it was good or bad. Okay. And so what you have to do is isolate and make sure that at no point in its execution can something which is untrustworthy get access to privileged data, privileged networks, devices, the user at the keyboard, clipboard, anything up, right? So essentially, that's the architecture rather than something which says I have to detect. So really, Bromium has decoupled this notion of detection from protection.
Yep.
Because if you think about the traditional approach, you have to detect something in order to then block it. That detection problem has become severe. So either you get lots of false positives or you let the bad guy through.
Yep.
And if you don't require that you detect to protect, then you have some really interesting opportunities.
And that, tell me a little bit about on the back end we were talking about earlier, the policies, if you will, in that
well, I will. There's just one quick thing I wanted to.
Go ahead.
In your scenario,
yes,
were you to do that? So we've downloaded a malicious PDF document, or how about a PDF document that contains a link to a malicious site?
Yes.
By clicking on that link yourself, you just start a new micro-VM.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? It's a new task. So,
right.
So basically, we've taken
a new swim lane.
Right. The new swim lane is created now, and that swim lane does have access to the internet.
Yep.
The PDF document does not. The PDF document lives in a micro VM that doesn't have a network.
Yes. Yep.
So that it thinks it's on a PC without a NIC.
Right.
You know, when you click on that link, it spawns off a new micro VM that happens to be a browser window.
Sure.
But that browser window, because it's untrusted, has connectivity only to the untrusted internet.
Right.
It cannot send a directly addressed IP datagram or resolve a DNS query to anything that I hold in high value.
Sure.
My intranet, any of my trusted sites, or anything high value to me like Salesforce.com. Okay, it just cannot do it.
Yep.
And so it can chit-chat with its botnet for all at once. I don't care.
Right. And what you're effectively doing is you're taking a workflow
Right.
and breaking it down into very, very granular pieces.
It's
and kind of chunking
Yes,
it up,
and-
right?
and so
and
then-
each of those chunks have
Right.
unique characteristics
Exactly.
that can access resources or can't
Yep.
access
Yes.
resources based on the
Yep.
Correct.
that chunk.
And so the challenge in doing this is to do it in such a way that you can peel back this notion of trust. I want to be maximally distrustful, and I don't want to mess up the user experience.
Sure.
Because you can imagine if you distrust everything, it could get really horrible. And you also don't want to create complex new management practices or tools for IT.
Yep.
I mean, if I give you a better system, why would it require more management?
Right.
Okay. So what we've managed to do thus far, Bromium, is for the chief vulnerable apps, right? So all the vulnerable MIME types, the sorts of things where you're going to get docs off of USB keys, web mail attachments, and so on. And for a trustworthy experience there, the user experience doesn't change, and there is no new management tool whatsoever.
Right.
So all you're doing to deploy vSentry is you deploy it as an MSI.
Yep.
It's late load, notice, right?
Yep.
You drop it onto Windows desktop. We jump down, grab VT, and do some magic. And then you write simple policies using 80 GPOs.
Okay.
And that's all it is. So, and the goal here is to define stuff that you trust, not stuff you don't, because you want to be maximally distrustful.
Right.
So, what do you trust? You trust update.microsoft.com, say, or whoever is going to push your patches, and then the least possible after that. That is, there are a few sites that you trust. Maybe you trust some apps on your internet, right? On your intranet. And then there will be other sites that are of high value to you. When you are talking to your consumer bank, or when you're interacting with Salesforce.com, what you want is the micro VM to be locked down in such a way that it can only ever send packets to that far site. Okay, no data theft going off into the end. So no cross-site scripting or any of that sort of stuff. Notice that also means that Facebook doesn't get to follow you through the browser into your Salesforce session, right? And so naturally the system then just divides itself up. So
You're protecting us all from Zuckerberg.
That's right. Yeah, I think he has enough problems.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
He's still going to invent a business model. But anyway, so that the cool thing about that is I could say, okay, great, an enterprise employee attached to the physical network in the enterprise could be on Facebook, still not ever threaten the rest of the corporate network, and they can be accessing some regulatory compliant network or application, and these things are never going to talk to each other. Right?
Yeah, very nice. And probably to just cover the super obvious, but it's one of those questions. I was like, oh wait, I don't know the answers. So this is Windows today?
Windows today, Mac's coming.
Yep.
Okay.
Right. And
but the broadly, the technology applies to anything that is hardware virtualization.
Right.
So,
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So we'll go there in the future. It's a general purpose hypervisor, and so it would work server side as well.
There's lots of things we're playing with, and also to speak further a little bit on policy, right?
Yep.
There's some things that'll come out of the box, but because this is a hypervisor, there's going to be a lot of API controlled stuff. We recognize that people are going to want to have different access levels for some things, and some people
And use different management consoles. So we'll
use
plug
different
in
management
the
consoles.
traditional
So,
security management
I mean,
consoles.
I think one of the beautiful things of having the experience of Zen behind us is this notion of API centric design.
Yep.
Very focused on the idea to
Yes.
make it easy to manage, make it easy to extend, make it easy to build your own stuff on top of it too, if you want. So like I said, this product is going to be vSentry is going to be awesome at protecting you from 0 days and giving you deep analysis into what happens. But let's say that you decide that you want to add additional functionality on top of it. Let's say there's all sorts of APIs associated that you could just build into it. If you want to monitor it using Splunk, if you want to monitor it using whatever, just plug into it. And so we're hoping to see a lot more of that.
Very cool. And kind of throw you a softball here
Sure.
too. Well, when we were talking about those policies, so talk a little bit about, okay, but going back to I'm the remote user, I hardly ever check in. How do those policies get dispersed?
So, these are AD GPOs. So for somebody who's off domain, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. It's basically just a cached local XML file. Okay. So there's you can do either way.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually not on domain. That's my normal way of working, but it works both ways.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that again, because the technology is architected to specifically work in the most untrusted scenarios.
Yep.
That's the idea. That's how we build it.
One thing we didn't mention is how you would patch a system like this.
Sure.
And you just use whatever you use today.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, straight from Microsoft or from SEC.
Right. So it's really from the ground up designed to build into whatever tools you use today, both to manage and deploy.
Yep.
Yes.
Nobody wants another console.
Right. Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
There's it's funny because you would just run into all these. A lot of people were asking what the admin console looks like, and we're like, "What are you using to manage Windows today?"
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
just tell us what you want. You know what I mean? Like, why do you need us to do that for you? You've already figured out what works for you, right?
Yes.
So
it's also, it's also strange. For a startup to go through a whole bunch of effort of building another management console and trying to make it beautiful and all that, it's a waste of time, really.
Yeah.
So we're basically focusing on building a better system, and we'll see where we go from there.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything else we want to talk about before we wrap this up?
Well, we touched on this notion of introspection. I just want to, I think it's very important to point out that this, VMware was, when they bought Determiner, they had this great idea, which is that essentially you could look at a VM from the outside, and I firmly believe that the hypervisor is ultimately the determiner of whether something is secure or not. That is, it owns all the hardware, it owns all the memory, it better be able to figure it out.
Yep.
That is ultimately, I think VMware has to go further into security. But to do so on a whole VM is very hard.
Yep.
But then when you have this very granular confines of a micro VM in the swim lanes, you have this perfect ability to actually spot stuff, right? Spot crazy things, and it's augmented with this task-specific notion of what is reasonable to expect.
Sure.
So,
and to take that back around, when we were doing the demo, it was almost the concept of, okay, you can watch exactly what they do and really kind of step through and so I apologize. I forgot what the lava was. That? Okay, so tell us. So right,
the key thing
tell us about lava here.
So just to be very clear, that we don't think that this competes with the traditional endpoint security technology and tools. We're not trying to do that, right? That is, this is designed to detect things that nobody can detect because you don't get a signature or the guy's got some permutation on an existing attack. And so the goal here is to augment the intelligence that we give to the security team, the IR team, and the intelligence that we can produce, because these micro VMs, remember, we own the clock. In point in time, we can stop it. So by the time you get to a point where something is very definitely attacking the system, you have a full trace of exactly what it's done. You know where it came from, what it was targeting, how it went for the user, and everything else. So you have this full exploit analysis. And you can basically stop the clock, hand it off to the security team, and they can use that to protect the rest of the enterprise by programming, all their firewalls and everything else.
Sure.
And so you get this, you get all of the intelligence that you'd normally get with forensic experts after the fact, who would then spend hours and hours and hours on a separate network trying to step their way through.
You're not only preventing something from happening, but at the same time you're performing an analysis on it that can result in an action to prevent future ones all in one.
Yep.
Yes.
Very nice.
And the thing I wanted to touch base on, so when we talk to people about this, because this is, and I have the same problem with the way Netscaler. When I talk to people about Netscaler, they always said, "Oh, it's just another load balancer, right?" It's like, well, not really. So when people just want to associate it with things that they're familiar with, and so a lot of times when we talk about this technology, people associate it with sandboxing, and I just want to take just a quick moment to talk about that, because I think that I think sandboxing is a great actually technology for managing applications and for deploying them. But I think that when you actually, the way we work, the fact that we spin up a micro VM for every single task, not for application, not for a process,
right.
You know what I mean? It's for every task, which is a specific workflow that you go through, you execute, and then you get out of, right? And then we do
Yeah,
hundreds of
and
these,
a
right?
quick for instance, again, going back to the demo here earlier, we went to a website and it was a redirect, just Bitly, right? And that actually created a micro VM for Bitly, and then another micro VM for the end.
So can't trust any of them,
right. So you had an application who was going to a site, but because it went to another site, it created 2 micro VMs. Right. So really granular. To go to your point,
right?
So
and that's what I'm saying. So
in
a sandboxing scenario, you'd have to literally create 8 browsers to do what we did, right? I mean, it's like, and it's not sustainable. How many VMs? If you were actually doing heavy VMs or legacy VMs, how many of those could you have on a single device? You'd have to create 8 VMs to run 8 instances of Internet Explorer.
Right.
Yeah, but more important, or as importantly, imagine you just put the browser in a VM or something, which, by the way, every one of us has been doing forever, right? So every one of us has had Parallels or Fusion or something, right? And then you have this one particular thing that you use just to go to your bank. Yeah. Right, okay. So the problem there is if you get attacked in that, then the attacker stays, and then they follow you wherever else you go next. So, you have to do it at this super granular level, otherwise it doesn't really offer you much protection.
Sure.
That is, or else you've got them pretend that you can detect the bad guy.
Right.
Which you've got.
Yes. And that circles back around, and we covered it extensively in episode 42 of the concept of the copy on write, and when the task or workflow is over, that micro VM is tossed.
Yes.
And so like you're to take that banking scenario, banking in a VM, and that VM is compromised scenario. Well, it's compromised for all time.
Right.
But in this scenario, even if something like that happens, it is effectively that copy on write technology kicks in and it's tossed when the task is done. So you're able to prevent yourself even if something does happen for future.
So there are a couple other things just to think about. When we're dealing with trust, you walked in here, you pop open your laptop and you browse somewhere, right? So you're in a hotel. Mm-hmm. Well, what's happening there is the infrastructure is lying to you. You go HTTP, mybank.com. Well, what happens? The hotel router thing says, "Oh, yep, that's me."
Yeah.
Okay, and that's okay if you're in a nice, friendly hotel, but if you're somewhere else, it might not be.
Right.
And so the moment that we're trying to build a bastion of trust, great, we start with one machine. The moment that machine reaches out to do anything, that is most applications we deal with nowadays reach out to something out there, you have to be able to solve the problem of what can I trust? And ultimately, at any point as you start to communicate with the outside world, it can attack you. Okay, and that means you could have an unfriendly DNS, you could have all sorts of attacks there. And so ultimately you have to be able to reach out to something on the far side that you trust, that's a solution to the Byzantine generals problem.
Also covered in episode 42.
Right. and so you've got to reach out to something like a DNSSEC.
Yes.
DNS, and you've got to be able to enumerate it and be sure that that's somebody that you're going to trust, and then you can go.
Right.
So it's the deeper we've gone into this, the harder it is. Give me another one. Tal has an Excel spreadsheet up, and it says there, okay, great, you want to print this. What does it mean to print something that you downloaded from the internet? Because printer attacks happen, right?
Right.
So we've got to take that thing, securely render it into basically a format which cannot attack the enterprise.
Yep.
Using code that we know has not been compromised yet.
Yep.
And then throw basically pixels at the printer.
Right.
Okay. So anytime you have this domain changed from low to high, that is something untrusted is going to go to some part of my infrastructure which is high privilege, or stuff going from high to low, we're in trouble. Well, it's anytime you cross from low to high. If you copy and paste from low to high, I have to have a view. If it's just text and fonts, okay. But if it's more than that, then what am I going to do? Right?
Sure.
And it might be asymmetric too. Can I allow you to copy privileged data into something which is untrustworthy? Right. And so you have to basically have hooks across this boundary between low and high, where you can insert an ability to do format conversion and, implement asymmetric policies and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
So like I said, there's lots of challenges ahead, for sure. But I think that, this first generation of the product is going to be a really interesting proof point. And we're really looking forward to seeing it.
We were literally out of time this week. That knock on the door was Simon and Tal heading to their next appointment. So a huge thanks to Simon and Tal for taking the time to speak with us. To find out more about the new vSentry product, you can go to bromium.com as of today. As for us, we're out of time, so you can follow us on Twitter at @thecloudcastnet or on the web at thecloudcast.net, where you can find links to our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and links to iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Thanks for listening.